Alright, so here's the deal. You've probably seen this German survey making the rounds, and for good reason, because the implications it carries are pretty damn heavy, and not just heavy, they're actually exciting. So assuming this is not an elaborate hoax, and we have many reasons to believe that it is not, well, Blizzard basically want to know what their players think about classes, specifically new classes. This was posted by Chromie.de, it was translated by Enrif on MMO Champion, and with it we've got a list of what Blizzard thinks is coming next. That's new classes, and of course, just like how Legion brought the Demon Hunter, we also get loads and loads of World Soul Saga lore hints and that sort of thing. It is an absolute hell of a list, but for something you can actually play literally right now, check out today's sponsor. They're a self-funded indie MMO that after 5 years in the oven are finally ready, and if you've had my gaming history, Corp Punk will snipe you. So, it's a new MMORPG, it's hit early access, and I'm very happy to say its feature set's awesome. So here's the deal. You have a massive, isometric, seamless open world that is of course packed with secrets, POIs, story, enemies, all the good stuff, but importantly, inspired by the ideals of old school MMOs, so it doesn't just turn into a modern, like, follow the quest marker type of game. That is so important, and I think WoW Classic proves that's what a lot of people want. And that sense of exploration is then doubled down on by their Fog of War system that, like a MOBA or an RTS, basically means you don't know what's around the corner. It's great for the sense of exploration and discovery, and all with gorgeous artwork that certainly, as an admirer of a lot of Blizzard's work, I absolutely vibe with. And where it gets real neat is combat, because they're cooking on that. Corp Punk plays like a MOBA, right? So you've got your basic click attacking, click moving, you've got full MOBA abilities like skill shots and everything, and a wealth of gameplay customization with 8 passive skill trees and weapon spec talents. All that comes together to actually be fresh in the MMO combat space. And it's got something that cuts to my youth. I can, again, in an isometric game, chop down a lot of trees. You see, they have got professions that are inspired by RuneScape and World of Warcraft. And in the world, that means the likes of logging, mining, herbalism, cooking, all that good stuff. It's just one of those games where you can chill out and sink into a big rich world, both solo and in a group, and they're rolling out seasons of fully voiced narrative, and most of all, developing with the community, with extensive alpha testing already having happened, and loads of changes and all that good stuff. And the best news is you can check it out and play it today with my link down below. You can hop into the early access and get stuck in. This game is a breath of fresh air. Getting stuck into the list, first of course, we've got the Tinker, the one that probably needs no introduction. So, we've always imagined a Tinker to be a goblin or a gnome, but this version is basically Blizzard asking about a tank, healer, and DPS that uses, of all things, Titan technology, which of course, if you think about mechagnomes, does make plenty of sense. That means mech suits, robot summons, and even something that they call inventions, which are custom-made spells. That sounds awesome, and if Blizzard wants to sell copies, well, I think that'll actually get people's interest. Now, another obvious entry is the Necromancer. We don't have much of a description here because everybody knows what a Necromancer does, and I think everyone wants to play one. You see, Demonology Warlock is one form of what some other MMOs would call a Horde class. World of Warcraft hasn't actually had a pure Horde class in the way that some other games have, so yeah, there is some overlap, obviously, with Demonology and Unholy DK, but I do think it's something Blizzard could actually pull off. Moving on then, the survey brings up the Bard, but not just some random fella with a lute. No, this time it is them using the Song of Azeroth for their magic, and it's Blizzard again suggesting another tank, healer, and DPS combo class, one that is specifically focused on support. So basically, it would be taking all of their augmentation evoker, like, learnings, and kind of weaving that into a big full class. And look, I know when most people think of a Bard, they think of some fella at a tavern. I totally get that, but if Blizzard were to do it in that way, I actually think it would feel unique to World of Warcraft, unique to the setting, unique to the lore, and that would actually help it stand apart. Okay, the next two then are fan favorites. They're pretty simple. There's the Warden, which would be using chat rooms and traps at mixed range, and then the very long-awaited Spellbreaker, which would basically be an anti-magic melee that would be enchanting their own gear. That all sounds pretty damn awesome. Now, this list also does just totally go off the rails. There are some ones that jumped out as just being crazy, but they kind of make sense. Titan Killer and Prismatic. Now, Titan Killer is said to combine Teshalak and Gorabal, which are the swords of Agrimar and Sargeras, to create their true form, Gorshalak the Dark Render. And that's pretty cool because if you know the lore, that is the semi-sentient sword that broke itself into pieces whenever Sargeras went mad in order to protect the universe. All pretty cool, crazy stuff. They would basically be connecting to cosmic powers of the Titans to defend Azeroth, which, as a lore-wise concept, does sound pretty damn cool. That being said, Is that a full class, maybe the anti-Titan version of the Demon Hunter, or is that something that's a bit more of a warrior hero talent? The same with Prismatic as well. Prismatics are, quote, heirs to titanic power, who can use their purest powers of the cosmos like life, order, death, and shadow to heal, tank, and DPS. And again, to me that sounds like, maybe a class, but also perhaps a bit of a mage hero talent tree, or an advanced class, something like that. Because of course many games do have advanced classes on top of what they usually ship. Plus, there's a very heavy focus here on the power coming from the Titans and from Azeroth. Another example is Leyweaver. That's another advanced mage-sounding class that's found in this survey. It uses Azeroth's ley lines to teleport about the place, as well, of course, as to heal, DPS, and support. There's also the Artificer, which in the survey specifically calls out to using handmade machines and Titan technology to do all three roles, which again does sound a little bit like a Titan tinker. But within its description, there are some real exciting touches, things like extendable flails and reactive shields. Sounds kind of awesome. And then there's the Witch, and this is really, really cool. It would be using old dark magic like Troll Voodoo, the Drustvar sort of witch magic, all of that decay stuff that we saw the Gnolls use in Dragonflight, all of that into a witch. I think that would be sick. And then after that, there's a few more generic ones like the Gunner and the Gunslinger, which would both be dual-wielding pistols. Hell yes to that. The Gunner would be using elemental buffs on their guns and ammo, while the Gunslinger would just be shooting enemies. And honestly, after playing a whole bunch of Mercenary and Path of Exile 2, oh, hell yeah, I could do with that. Now, there's also another one in this, the Apothecary. It's another healer, support, and DPS using potions that they combine, and there's also Battle Mage, which of all of these just sounds a little bit undercooked. There's a quick line about empowering weapons with elements and creating constructs, which just sounds like a mage-ish enhancement shaman, so don't really know if that'll be a thing. Then we've got two that distinctly don't feel like World of Warcraft. They're quite cosmic-y though, so there's the Astrologian. If you're a Final Fantasy player, you'll know that. It's a spellcaster using stars and gravity magic, which basically just sounds like an advanced arcane mage. And then the Celestial Lancer. That would be a melee that leaps about the place using spears and Titan magic. Again, if you play Final Fantasy XIV, you'll know that's basically a Dragoon. So you might be wondering then, Michael, what the hell? That is so much stuff. How could Blizzard put anywhere near any of this into the game? Well, that's a good question. The answer here to all of this is Blizzard, well, they have ideas, but they don't have a firm direction, and that is why they're doing a survey. Surveys like this are designed to find out what kind of fantasies would land the hardest with players. And to make sense of that, we just need to look to the past. Look at the Evoker, right? That landed to a mixed at best response. It was a mid-range Twink Dragon caster, whenever what most people wanted was basically some extremely roided up, muscle-bound, crush-my-face daddy Chad dragon, which is obviously what they didn't get. So the idea of Blizzard heavily market testing, seeing what ideas gel with people, that's pretty damn obvious. They want to drop this news on a stream or, say, Gamescom next year and have the crowd explode with joy. If the Midnight expansion isn't to have a new class, this is them teeing up the big things that they want to do with The Last Titan. And if Midnight is giving us player housing as its big back-of-the-box feature, well, maybe Blizzard do decide to go as hard as they can on classes for The Last Titan. I would certainly sell copies of the game. Going back to the survey, though, we know which ones that they would most likely want to give us because it asks about those in more detail before asking for rankings of the rest. And those are Prismatic, Bard, Gunner, and Astrologian. So the questions here are specifically how well a class fits in the Warcraft universe, how interested the player filling out the survey would be in playing it, and how adding that would basically impact their World of Warcraft experience. That's what they've got for those, but for the rest of the concepts, they basically just show you a few things and ask you which you would be most likely or unlikely to play. Okay, let's take our hype meters down and try to discuss this a little bit more rationally. So the next question is when, and the answer is again obvious, it's The Last Titan. Midnight is just over a year or so away. I know that sounds crazy, but that is actually how the dates are lining up, and we already know about the player housing. If Blizzard were asking about class concepts for Midnight, that would basically mean that they would be deciding on that and making a whole class in time for alpha, which, to call that too fast would be putting it lightly. Though it is of course true that for World of Warcraft's history, we used to get a class every other expansion, but that trend did stop with Shadowlands. It was the first odd-numbered expansion to ship without one, so they did kind of break the pattern there. And with hero talents and warbands this expansion and player housing taking up the marketing banner in Midnight, I think it does track that the Last Titan would need a class to actually spice it up and get people excited. And that would obviously explain how Azeroth and Titan stuff is just deeply rooted in like all of these different concepts. Like every new class that we've ever gotten in World of Warcraft was tied directly to the story of the expansion that it shipped in. So it is really all lining up. And if we assume that, there are things we could just cut out of the list, right? Like Witch, Apothecary, Battle Mage. They're quite generic. They don't really feel like things that would scream, The Last Titan. This is the expansion where you do the JRPG thing and kill God at the end. So that's them ruled out. I think it would also rule out the Warden, Spellbreaker, and Necromancer. I think players would love those, but again, they don't really scream the story. If Spellbreaker was to happen, you'd probably tie that to the Quel'Thalas revamp, but, well, having that for Midnight does seem pretty damn ambitious. The Gunner and Gunslinger are worth talking about though, because you might think those are extra unlikely. Adding, say, one-handed guns as whole new weapons in WoW would be a bit of a big step, but honestly, they did that in Legion with Demon Hunter, so that doesn't completely rule it out. Taking everything into account then, based purely on the survey, I would say the most likely one is probably Bard, right? That's the one that they're asking about specifically through the survey questions, and I think to most generic, like general MMO players, it's very recognizable, far more so than Prismatic. People wouldn't really know what to make of that. And of course, there's the Radiant Song. It just fits Bard. It would make sense. There's actually a reason why the Bard's music would be magical and powerful, as opposed to just, your mates are all just hopped up and good vibes and they're hitting harder. Though with Bard, I'm very keen to know, like, what kind of weapon they would use. How would that actually function? So, an interesting problem, especially because it would be a supporting tank, healer, and DPS. Bards are traditionally similar to rogues. They tend to fight with very simple weapons, but then use support magic, like say the bards in FF, which use a bow. So how Blizzard spins that would be pretty interesting, especially when it comes to giving 3 specs and then hero talents. The next question then is, these are all really cool, why are we only getting one of them? Could Blizzard do more? My personal hope, actually, is that these ideas are a mixture of hero talents, new specs, and new classes. I mean, we already know that Blizzard are going to expand hero talents. The system is kind of designed so they could do that. So thinking of it in a way like suddenly Titan Killer as a warrior, or maybe a Demon Hunter, makes total sense. Witch being a Shaman hero talent makes sense. I mean, Gunslinger is a 4th rogue spec. That would also be pretty cool. Could Blizzard just add some new specs to the game? I mean, I don't see why not. Druids have got 4, it wouldn't kill us to make rogues have a 4th. Now, setting aside some balance concerns for a minute, I think the game could just do with more fantasies being opened up to players, and this stuff would work. I mean, just to mention it, it's important that Blizzard keep bringing out tank and healer specs as well. New exciting classes will not stop the population issues alone, but if Blizzard can fix the problems that tanks and healers are currently facing, I mean, a new class, that could really get people excited to try out the role. And it would also mean the unique challenges of tanking and healing could be approached from different design angles, which, of course, could appeal to more players. But there is something to keep in mind here: methodology. This is one survey. Nobody else has shared their survey yet, but you see, surveying users, especially across different languages, audiences, countries, is a complicated and actually fascinating business. To get proper data, you need to send out a load of surveys, and I mean, that's surveys that will often have different combinations to work around the biases of different users. So this could only be a small fraction of what Blizzard are actually thinking about. Or it could be that their heart is actually just set on one and they want to make sure that people are down for it. That's, of course, if the survey is real at all. Chromie.de were the people who were posting it. They did imply that multiple players actually sent them in. And indeed, I regularly get in my email surveys that people send in, and very often those surveys can't really just be posted verbatim online, because these surveys actually, they will basically say, this is confidential, please do not share. I know it's a little bit like saying, oh, this is my OC, do not steal. People will do whatever they want on the internet. But the point is that often the specific language, even the ordering of questions, can be done to be decently identifiable. And I know a lot of people would say, well, why don't you just look at the forum, look at videos, what people are actually talking about, and get your ideas from there. You see, the thing about these surveys is Blizzard has got one of the most gargantuan email lists on the planet, right? They have millions and millions and millions of emails, so they could send one of these to people who are current subscribers of the game. They could send one of these emails to people who only play Classic. They could send these emails, these surveys, to people who haven't played the game in 5 years, and that will tell them how different segments of World of Warcraft's overall population actually, well, vibe with all of these different ideas. So it's exciting stuff, and if I was a betting man, I would absolutely say we will be getting new class content in the Last Titan expansion. I think that class content will absolutely be themed to that expansion, which means the Titans, maybe Sargeras, and of course, lots of Azeroth as well. Now, there is another cool thing, and it's one you can do right now. Blizzard have actually made gearing up in World of Warcraft a hell of a lot faster, so you can check that out in this news video right here. The implications are truly ginormous, even if you don't play Mythic Plus.